I like the idea that the community is more than just your extended family, and you're not just taking care of someone just because they're your blood relative, but that you are
Mm-hmm.
taking care of another person to take care of another person because they are a person.
Mm,
Love that.
yeah.
And we
The
are
recording.
recording.
Hi, how's it going?
Hello. As you notice, I still don't have my microphone set up because I am waiting on a paycheck, which is waiting on a credit card to be paid off, which is waiting on a lot of other contingent things. So, we're working on it. We're working with what
It's
we
in
have.
progress. You just summed up like every struggle that I think everybody in our age group, most people in our age group understand. Money is a for real thing.
Money is a for real thing. We are living in the age of inflation. I now
Mhm.
have to pay off my Venmo debts to my friends before I can pay off my credit card debts. But thankfully, Venmo has a 0% APR because you just owe your friends.
Yes, thank goodness.
And the only thing you're risking there is your relationships. Credit scores got nothing on relationships.
Just that tiny thing called a friendship. We're doing fine.
Speaking of debt relief, we're expecting to get another package. They're supposed to be pushing something through, a new package of debt relief somewhere. I heard it on a podcast this morning, so fingers crossed for this Biden administration to get that done,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because I will
and major
cry.
shout out to yes. Oh, like I don't know what I would do, but major shout out to what they've already done. I mean, I didn't expect Biden, no offense, to be the president who's moved this far into debt relief. So major shout out to the Biden administration for sure.
Maybe this is like the light at the end of the tunnel, like the tunnel being that deep dark hole that was 2016 through like 2020.
Maybe. I definitely feel a lot better.
It's
So
just a deep dark hole that we don't talk about it. Do we do we talk about the fact that we jump started our young adult lives during that black hole phase? No. It's like the Great Depression. Our grandparents didn't talk about it. We don't talk about that.
this reminds me of that TikTok. I'm pretty sure you sent it to me where the girl talks about how she thinks society is falling apart. And then she tells her mom, and her mom goes, "Oh, that's just a 20s thing." Like, I felt the same way. And her mom was actually living through a time where everything was falling apart. I'll share it because I watch that daily because it brings me a lot of joy and I feel affirmed.
Between that and the other TikTok that I think either I sent you or you sent me, where it was just like, your life might be a mess, but your life is not actively hurting our nation's well-being.
Yes. You sent that to me. Hannah's the best at sending TikToks, everybody. I will link that as well. I'm so glad that got mentioned. That is my new catchphrase. You might be a mess, but your mess doesn't affect the well-being of all of us. So it's
Like,
okay.
we make mistakes. I accidentally
Mm-hmm.
slept through a meeting last month that I was supposed to
Mm-hmm.
go to. But I didn't actively reinstate Title 42 and turn thousands of migrants away from the border that were legally seeking asylum. I didn't do that, Biden.
Mm-hmm.
See, we can appreciate him, but also critique him. He's not doing great on the immigration front. No one likes this.
Mm-hmm. I think, like, in general, it's important to be able to critique people. Like, the idea that we need to blindly follow people is false. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even within the Democratic Party, when they try to say that there's some type of separation, it's just because there's a wide array of Democrats. Like,
Mm-hmm.
And then that's okay. That's healthy. We don't want anyone saying, whatever you say, we will follow. It's healthy to have some pushback.
Speaking of not having pushback or having a lot of pushback, we finally have a House Speaker after a unprecedented, well, it was precedented about 150 years ago or whatever, 15 rounds of votes.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Kevin. And his name is Kevin.
And his name is Kevin.
Like, can we go ahead and do our Fangirl 5 for like a second right now?
Yes, let's do it. You go first.
Let's just flip it. Because my Fangirl 5 is Cheryl Johnson, the House clerk. We're sitting there day after day, count after count. That's 400 different, like, people over 400 people she has to count saying yay or nay or present or even like nominating freaking Donald Trump as the House Speaker, looking at you, freaking Matt Gaetz. But Cheryl Johnson had to show up to work, be on C-SPAN for 12 hours at a time, and say a speaker has not been chosen with a straight face without just like screaming it.
Yeah, I think at about day 3 I would have been annoyed, so major shout out to her.
And the House Rules package just got passed too, so part of that is the fact that C-SPAN is no longer allowed to do like the live shifting cameras thing, which was honestly the best part of my week last week. I had strep throat, so the best part of my week was literally sitting back, eating soup, and watching C-SPAN just taken all of this messy glory. So that's
very entertaining.
Yeah. And they're not allowed to do that anymore. There was almost fisticuffs on the House floor in the Republicans at the same time that Katie Porter, Representative Katie Porter, had the book of subtly not giving a bleep. She was reading a book called The Art of Subtly Not Giving a Bleep while the Republicans were in fisticuffs.
It's like something, I mean, it was on TV, but it's like something fictional that you would see on TV.
Mind blown. So the fact that Cheryl Johnson could keep all of that together as the House clerk. Someone give Cheryl a raise. Go Cheryl.
Oh my gosh.
It's my Fangirl 5 right there. Who is your Fangirl 5 for this week?
I love your Fangirl 5. I think she deserves a ton of credit. I'm going to go back to Michelle Obama again because I listened to her on Conan's Conan Needs a Friend. It's his podcast. I definitely recommend it. It is hilarious. And just hearing her speak, I was like, that's my first lady. I miss her so much. So definitely going back to Michelle Obama. If you haven't already bought her book, her second book, then definitely do that. Love her. I am forever a fan of her, but these 2 weeks I'm definitely highlighting her again.
Can do whatever she freaking wants. Eloquent, probably one of the most accomplished first ladies we've ever had. Like, come on, that photo of her and Obama both in law school, and like they had, who's the older one, Malia? I just know them as Sasha and Malia, so like I'm just like, who's the older one?
Yeah, Malia's the oldest.
So she's just like playing with Malia while like they're going over like law school homework. I could never.
Wait, I'm trying to think because they were well out of law school when they had kids.
Really?
Yeah.
What were they looking at then? It wasn't law school homework. I guess it was law stuff.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're both accomplished. They've always been very accomplished in their field.
Forget law school. That was actually law stuff.
But yeah, I mean, queens, right? Like, oh my gosh, all of them. I love the Obamas so much.
One day, hopefully, maybe someone who is anywhere near them gets a whiff of this podcast and just hears us like just fangirling all the time over the Obamas. It would have been, oh, I'm not going to say that on recording right now.
Okay.
You know what I was gonna say?
I have an idea. I will say on recording, I hope that they get a whiff of this podcast and they're like, yeah, Michelle Obama, they mention you as their fangirl 5 every week for an entire season. So maybe check them out.
It is the most prestigious award this podcast can allot, honestly.
For sure, for sure. Huge fans. Huge fans.
And that's just this week. That was
Mhm.
just the first week of 2023. I'm tired.
That's crazy.
Your
Oh
eyes
my
just like
God.
went so wide whenever you realized that was just week one.
It's like, oh my God, 1 week? It feels like we're already maybe 2 months in.
I'm so tired.
Every year you start the new year, at least I start the new year like, oh, it's a new year, new hope, it's fantastic. And then you settle in and you're like, I'm exhausted pretty quickly. I had more energy as a kid.
Oh, same. And then you would accidentally write the wrong year on your papers and pencil, and then you'd scratch out and be like, LOL, it's a new year, yay, ha ha. And now we're just going like, can 2020 end, please?
It's different as an adult for sure. We were just talking pre-recording about just how great college was, and man, what a time.
No responsibilities. None.
No responsibility. Food for those of us who ate at our colleges, prepared in dining halls. Your only job was to go to the dining hall and then socialize. Like, oh man.
The blissful ignorance that you had not knowing what a credit score was. We've also discussed this before on this podcast. The blissful ignorance that credit scores were not racist, because they are racist apparently. And they were invented in the 80s. So someone had it in for our generation.
They said this generation needs to be affected by this. And that feels true for a lot of issues, unfortunately. A lot of them feel personal towards us.
I mean, we're at the tail end of millennials here. We're borderline zillennials. No, we're not the idiots that ate the Tide Pods, but we're also the idiots that got sucked into now what is probably a third recession.
Yes. Unprecedented times, huh?
Doing great.
It's all we know.
I think that's a great segue from these unprecedented times to more unprecedented times in our amazing book.
Yes, I will say right now, I love this book.
I like, oh my gosh. What are your first thoughts on this first interview?
Love it. Love everything about it. Miss Kelly is someone that I want her to be real. I want to meet her. I want to sit down and have a conversation with her. She just seems so cool.
Like, it immediately, like, what immediately came to my mind was the Humans of New York. Do you remember that famous interview with Miss Turnkey?
I don't think I read that one.
It was a huge series. It got turned into a book. And it might, her name might be pronounced Tarkany. Miss Tarkany? But I'll send you the link as soon as we're done. But like, she just lived such a rich and amazing life. And like, this interview style is so cool. Like, it makes me think, okay, this book is solely about the interviews. What's going on outside of these interviews? Where is this interview taking place? I want to know more about the world and context in which these people are talking, because they're talking about history. But I want to know what's going on. Are there kids running around the streets? Are there Are there like, is there things going on? Like, in New York, you hear sirens going off all the time. In this post, like, it almost sounds like post army, post military, post whatever timeline. What do you hear? If it's not sirens, what would you hear in New York?
Yeah. Oh, New York. That's a good question. I mean, they left it up for the imagination. I imagine them on a porch and like rocking chairs, but
Oh
it is
yeah.
the Bronx, so maybe. But this is like a post-war society, so who knows?
Insane. I love how the interview just starts off. The first interview of the book is a sex
Hmm.
worker. I love how they
Yeah.
changed the I love how they changed the language around sex work. It's decriminalized, it's destigmatized. It is seen as something that is normalized, something where people that engage in this kind of work are able to be safe and respected
Hmm.
and have access to things like food and healthcare. And like, say what you want in terms of like the morality of sex work and everything like that, the legality, the morality, the ethics of it, but
Hmm.
as human beings we deserve food, shelter, and healthcare.
Hmm.
Which some people don't even believe that we deserve that as humans right now. And so like, it
Hmm.
just blows my mind to think that someone can dream of a future that's in like 20 years, 40 years, 40 years, 67. This was
Yeah.
interviewed in 67. That human dignity and human beings are able to live with that kind of dignity in this
Hmm.
future.
Yeah, that is very interesting and fantastic because I'm not very skeptical in my future imagine,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But I
Like,
did highlight the words that you're talking about how sex work is just not as stigmatized. And I know the first thing I saw was skin craft. Like they even changed the vocabulary of how they spoke about people who were in sex work. And now they called the people who were in sex work skinners, which like we read a couple of times throughout this interview. It's just fantastic. This set a really great tone, I think, for the rest of the book.
it does. It shows us this is a new world.
Hmm.
This is a new world. And even in our short almost 3 decades of life, we've even seen the etymology of sex work in terms being changed because people are not referred to as hookers anymore. People aren't referred to as prostitutes. Sex work being called out as legitimate work that deserves safety and healthcare has been something that people are talking about. It's not something that is like a red light district shoving under the door where no one wants to see the unsavory side of life or whatever. It's something that is like, okay, this is an aspect of life in society, and how do we get people to be the safest and healthiest that they can be?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would say one of the things that really stuck out about this chapter was how I think Miss Kelly emphasized that the girls who were a part of sex work were the ones who were then, after everything happened and there was this eruption in society, and now in this next part of society, the reason that they're safer and the reason it's less stigmatized is because they're in charge of how it's run. And so she emphasized like the girls run it, so everybody knows where everybody is. They stay in contact. They have rights that are identified and very much so enforced. It's a fantastic thing to hope for and to think that could be for real.
Like, this chapter also mentions like things like demilitarization, the breakdown of the global food trade, which is a little scary because I don't know about you, but I can only grow plants that are inedible.
Okay.
Like I can't like
Mhm.
I can't grow gardens or carrots or like pumpkins or whatever. And so whenever she talks about the breakdown of the global food chain, I panicked a little bit because
Mhm.
she did describe an aspect of like people would have to wait in line for food, and no one wants to wait in line for food. I get really mean when I'm hangry.
Mm.
Like I get mean.
Oh yeah. Hangry is for real a thing.
It is. And it kind of touched on that idea that like what my parents fear of whenever they think of communal anything. They're like, communism is just waiting in lines for stuff. They think of communist Russia and how like that broke down and how people were forced to starve. But like we're talking about like a smaller scale, and from what we're imagining here, things are locally sourced, people are taking care of each other, and everyone is getting fed. It's not talking about food shortages like there were in the past being now with the global supply chain.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I loved about this chapter. There are many things I loved about this chapter, but another thing to add on top of that list is because I live in a smaller town and I have an uncle who has a farm and it is very much so on demand. So thinking about that, I understand your concern in terms of like, I can't only eat what I grow. I also could not do that, but just thinking about like sourcing from local farmers and supporting their businesses. Cause I mean, I don't know a ton about the farming industry, but I know that there is a lot of debt and there is a lot of exploitation of farmers. So just thinking of like supporting local farms, eating food that is better for us, that's not, it literally said not who wants food shipped around the world or something, and I was like, oh my gosh, lol, that's literally what we do right now.
It is.
It's all we know right now. And so that part really excited me, just thinking about, because I mean I try my best to support local businesses anyway, so thinking about that as a communal way of life. And I think what you said about it being a smaller group, I think that's the significance of the communes. It's not what you're thinking about, which we've been like brainwashed to thinking anything community oriented is automatically leading to socialism or communism. Like it's not. It's this tiny little thing where everybody's taken care of, and it's in this fantastic book, so wonderfully drawn out.
It is. And like how they describe it as there's the Hunts Point commune in the small
Mm-hmm.
community, but New York and the surrounding areas is also a commune. So there's
Yes.
not like a differentiating like word for that, but it's just like talking about how like these small communities, they have networks. They're networks that are connected, that hey, over here, if you're having issues with food supply, we have extra food over here, and we're able to share through these networks. There's no gatekeeping. There's no like, you don't get these resources because you're over here or whatever. They did talk about a little bit of gatekeeping with like past like bosses,
Mm-hmm.
military, and like in order to try to bring about this change. But the way that she described it, the way that Miss Kelly described it was, if you decided to shift your way of life, you came
Mm-hmm.
asking for something and wanted to be a part of the community, we would accept you. And
Mm-hmm.
you just can't be a part of that police brutality anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly how she pointed it out. And I actually kind of love that because they were kind, because they could have been vengeful and been like, you were in power, so figure it out. But they weren't, because they're loving people.
Like,
And so they
yeah,
allowed, if there was a change of perspective. But I mean, and I understand why they would do that. I can't imagine having a commune and then within that having someone who has to be like a hierarchy. they have to be better than, they have to be like at the forefront, it would completely contradict what they're trying to do.
It reminded me a lot, gonna go a little biblical here, the book of Acts.
Ooh.
One time, whenever I was like a punk college kid, and I was like, stick it to the man, I straight up told my pastor's wife mother that the early church was a commune. And she went, "Oh, how dare you, Hannah?" And I was like, "Look at these Bible verses." And then you hear my dad, the pastor, shouting from across the house, "She's right."
See, it's even in the Bible. This is a good idea.
What dad pointed out, though, was the early church was maybe 300 people.
Also a solid point.
Also a solid point. And globalization had not happened yet.
I do think like at the core of Christianity, which is why it's so interesting growing up Christian and then seeing everything that it's been used to look over and everything it's been used to agree with. Like, I think one of the core principles is taking care of one another. So for me, a commune and a society that's designed like this is actually very Christian. But to those who have misconstrued what I would consider a misconstruing of the teachings of Jesus Christ, there's something they hate about everybody being taken care of. I still can't wrap my head around it.
No, you would think that universal education, healthcare, and putting money into social services would be something that people who utilize school, healthcare, and social services would be totally pro. But instead, they want to protect guns. And an amendment that was literally created before the semi-automatic rifle, so that and it took like 30 seconds to reload, so you couldn't like mow down like a whole concert full of people in like 2 seconds.
It's wild. I mean, it feels clear to me what the choice is, but
I'm interested to see if they do mention more about the demilitarization process. They kind of touch on it with like the idea that like the military just loses support, which is kind of low-key what we're seeing a lot. Like, military recruitment is down for the first time in like 30 years right now. And like, what's so interesting is like the usual recruiting tactics, like free college education and healthcare and housing. That stuff's not even pulling people anymore. Because if we have social service programs that provide housing, healthcare, and education, who's gonna want to go and like fight foreign entities over oil?
The military is interesting because yes, those are a lot of the pools in which they recruit young people out of high school. They recruit. We're doing fine. But everything that's coming out about military culture, to me, it's not shocking that the numbers are down. Like with our generation and then the Gen Z that are coming up after us, like people really aren't feeling that. Well, first of all, I didn't even know military culture was so bad. I don't know if that was ignorance on my part or if they did a really good job of covering it up. But now it's very clear to me, like, what people who do decide to go the military route go through. Like I have family members who are currently in the military and they talk about like their experiences. I have friends. So I don't know, it's just interesting because that to me is in any way, it's not so far-fetched in terms of, we could see it right now, the interest is going down. So I don't know. My assumption is with the different perspectives that are coming with the other
Mhm.
interviews that they definitely will touch on that a little more. Maybe it's just that Miss Kelly didn't see
Mhm.
more into the demilitarization process.
I like the fact that we are getting one story at a time and not like you get with normal fiction where it's like you have a third person point of view, omnipresent, omnipotent,
Mm.
like you see everything like looking down in a diorama. Like we don't know what else is going on. Like in this new world, what happened to Beyonce?
My guess is she's still queen, but that's a good question.
What happened to celebrity culture? That's what I'm
Yeah.
curious about. Like what happens to everyday life, the arts,
Mm.
recreation, sports. Like, oh, also just a slight pause, Damar Hamlin, we love him, doing good.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, what an emotional roller coaster. But
Oh my
yeah, he
gosh.
is.
Yes.
He's doing well.
But yeah, completing that thought, and then we can talk more about Damar. But like I wonder what all of this extra stuff that literally only exists for capitalism is doing now, you
Well,
know?
I would say with the arts, I'm glad you brought that up. The arts are something that really help convey what's going on during certain periods of time. So I would be shocked if there wasn't a artist perspective. I feel like, did I read something in the intro about an artist?
Maybe.
This is sounding familiar now. I would be shocked if there's no artistic view from one
Mhm.
of these interviews because I feel like that plays a huge role in at least how the times were perceived as they were happening.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting because there's stuff from our lifetime inside the Smithsonian right now.
Mhm.
Like there's like the first iPod in the Smithsonian. I had to tell my nieces that were older than iPods the other day, and they just looked at me with horror. Um, oh, but that also like swinging back to Damar Hamlin, the first thing that he says when he wakes up is, "Did we win the game?" And the doctors are like, "Dude, like I
You think
appreciate
we finished the game?
passion, but like you had a heart attack."
Man, that's oh my gosh, what an emotional roller coaster. But like, yeah, like you think we completed the game? You think we've been thinking about anything but you for the last like 4 days?
Like, sir. And I recognize that I am calling a 24-year-old someone who is 4 years my junior, a sir. But sir,
Sir.
like,
It's an appropriate amount of shock because it's like, really?
but also to think that that's what this society has pushed him to,
Mm.
for him to put the game above his health.
Hmm.
Oh, also, I need to send you this TikTok too. Um, historically speaking, and this historically speaking, once the NFL started getting sued for concussions
Hmm.
and started having to make payouts for concussions, this guy on TikTok that I found said that they actually paid out Black players less because, and I quote, they had less mental capacity to begin with.
Hmm.
So racism is alive and well in the NFL.
Oh, oh, is it? But yeah, I remember that. I don't remember if they were suing the NFL, if like the Black Players Coalition was suing them, but I remember them explicitly saying that concussions, they weren't taken as seriously in Black athlete or in Black football players. And yeah, the payout wasn't as serious because they didn't think the damage was as bad. And it's like, how could you say that to humans, but also as a mostly Black league?
As like as a league that's also owned mostly by white shareholders and white owners of these teams, coming from a history of literally a country that enslaved Black people for like hundreds of years. I don't put it past their the white people's descendants, to be that blatantly and openly racist. I know it's a stretch, but at the same time, and it's the year of our Lord 2023, but at the same time, we're only like 200 years removed from chattel slavery.
Yeah.
And still remembering that my mom did not go to school with Black kids because of segregation.
I would just hope, because that happened recently-ish. You would hope, of this is me being naive, I would hope that at some point they would be like, maybe let's put work into it to not be as racist. But that clearly hasn't happened. And unfortunately, things keep getting revealed within the NFL that like continue to prove how much work that has to be done, but won't be done.
How about we cut like some of the owners' cuts and pay reparations that way? They don't need 15 houses in Malibu.
We were talking about the salary caps that players have, because I think we were talking about how there are certain teams who can't get players that they need because they're already paying their players too much for the salary cap. And it's like, it's interesting there's a salary cap for players when there's not one for the owners.
It's interesting that there's a salary cap when, you know, franchises are millions of dollars in debt and money is a construct anyway, going back to the commune aspect of it.
It's just, I mean, we could do like, you and I could talk about the NFL for a while.
Like, here's the thing, I don't even like football. I just grew up in Texas.
Oh, which brings me to, we now know something about this first narrator, one of the researchers. They were in Alabama right before everything went down, and then they came back to New York. So I'm excited to learn more about these two narrators and or the researchers, so we can figure out who is who. Right now, I am down south. So maybe like 0.1 towards me, but I look forward to seeing that.
What's interesting is like we could technically go and like I already tried to find these people on Instagram because of who I am as a person, but if we really put our minds to it, we could go and like ask them more questions. It's the beauty of fiction and world building. You can just go and ask the author. You can't do that with like true. You can't do that with like fiction like Lord of the Rings because like Tolkien's been dead, but like I have questions.
Right, but books like, I mean, because even with Nicole Chung, with like, I follow her on Instagram, like I could comment on her stuff. They're so much more accessible, and this is so recent. I think, oh yeah, if I have questions, we definitely should ask them, because I would love to talk.
That would be awesome if I could only find their Instagrams. I'm not turning into a stalker. We're doing great.
It's actually impressive that they've made it difficult to find them. Like, that's really hard to do.
They're probably just preparing, because what happens to social media in this? Like, what they say that they have communication, but what kind of communication? What is the global community like? Since so much of our society today relies on the global supply chain and globalization and international politics and geopolitical stunts and all of this other stuff. What is going on? I have these questions.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I look forward to everything that gets revealed, because they don't mention a single form of communication, even when they're talking about, and one thing I love about this chapter is the sex workers are, or the Skinners, if you're using the terminology of the book, they are integral in the food supply in their commune and like neighboring communes, and in like they did like social like morale building stuff. They were a huge part of defining the culture of this commune. So
Yeah.
and they don't talk about communication ways. They just talk about how it was done. So we'll see if someone goes a little more in detail about that.
I mean, whenever we talk about the privatization of internet communication, these things that low-key should be public utilities. You shouldn't have to pay for Wi-Fi nowadays. It's fine. We're fine. Looking at you, Spectrum. How communication is so vital to our society. Like, it's how anything gets done. So communication had to be one of the first things that was set up after the insurrection. Oh gosh. We're fine. The committee just sent its final recommendations and disbanded, by the way. So we're gonna be getting word out from that soon. We're doing great.
That word's got so much weight. But I'm happy to think about an insurrection in this context as opposed to what we experienced in January of last year.
What we experienced in January of last year, what Brazil is technically experiencing right now. Like, dude. And where was the guy that kind of low-key incited the Brazilian insurrection? He was hanging out in Florida. What else do we know about Florida? It's another famous hangout spot for another insurrectionist that we love. We're doing great. We are doing fantastic. Like,
so
I want to bring up that Miss Kelly mentioned sex workers, not social workers. Do you think in this world were social workers part of the problem or part of the solution?
Oh, I can easily see how it's part of the problem. I can easily see how it's one of the professions where they're like, you need to change your ways before you can dine with us. I can easily say, I would hope that it could also be a part of the solution though. But the interesting thing about social work is the idea we're supposed to be trying to work ourselves out of a job, especially when you're thinking about clinical social work. So ideally, social work would help build the communes. And then once they're there, then you don't have a job anymore. And it's great because every need is supplied. But I don't know. I don't know what social work looks like in this context, in this society. What do you think?
I think that social work and the way that it is seen as a profession is so buried in bureaucracy right now that unfortunately it will fall on the other side of history. And I feel like the social workers that don't conform to that bureaucracy will find other functions, will not call themselves social workers. Because right now, you say social work, it kind of carries like some form of bureaucratic weight.
Yes.
Like, you think of someone in a pencil skirt and probably hating their life, sitting at a computer hunched over. Whenever you think social work right now, I just described myself, except for I'm not in a pencil skirt, I'm in leggings. But for someone that is actually on the ground, making change, actively setting up these new systems of support for these communes, I don't think they would call themselves social workers.
Okay, I can see that.
Like, we met so many,
Go ahead.
We met so many people in school that I don't think would call themselves social workers if they had the chance.
And you think that because they don't stand with the bureaucracy that is social work?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So officially in this like with that understanding of social work, then it definitely would fall with all of the other systems that fell apart.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Wonder what else is gonna fall apart. I'm excited to see.
This is my favorite kind of book because I love when it's one story told fully and then you go to the next one. Like I love the collections of short stories. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to hear all of they are fictional but feel so real stories and meet all these people.
It literally does feel like one of those Humans of New York stories. You like find someone on the side of the road and you're just like, hey, tell me something about yourself. And then they launch into these amazing stories. Then they go back to doing whatever they're doing. And then you just move on. And then you're just like, that's really cool. That's someone's life. Someone's life is really cool. Yeah. It makes me feel very nice to think that like no life is insignificant. That value of human worth and that inherent value that we all have and that we all share, that no human is not worth nothing. That was so many negatives in one sentence. I'm sorry. I can't think right now. I'm thinking about dumplings. But it makes me really excited about that. So you might feel lazy and you might feel like a piece of trash, but you're not a piece of trash that actively harms other people and causes people to lose healthcare and stuff like that. Your decisions do not affect those. One day I would love to have my decisions be in charge of someone's healthcare so that I could provide it. Not actively provide it, but provide access to it. I'm not a doctor, but like that would be cool.
Yeah. I love the idea of which whenever I talk about capitalism, whenever I define it, I say that your worth is based on your production. And so just understanding like in the commune, just being allows you to be worthy of like the things that we talk all the time about: healthcare, food, shelter. And I mean, just the great, not even misunderstanding, but difference in opinion between like what far right socialists think of what we're deserving of, and what people who have really been brainwashed by capitalism think we have to earn everything. The commune seems to be in the same it seems to be in agreement with us. It's more about just being, and it's our job to take care of each other, which, as I mentioned earlier, feels very Christian-y. But I love the idea of a society where, if you want to do a whole bunch of stuff and you want to do a million things and make $1 million, then that's great. But if you want to just lay in your bed, then your needs are taken care of. I love the idea of a society where that's possible.
Yeah, exactly. And like how capitalism is basically just ruined it all for like, if you have a disability and are unable to work, it directly puts the value of you as a human being on your, as you said, on your ability to produce and to work, which is ridiculous, first of all. And second of all, people are literally like, it costs so much money just to exist nowadays. And I love how they just in this book talk about that as if it's in the past. Like existing is a luxury that people can't afford. Well, I can't afford existing right now, and I guarantee you I'm not having a great time. I saw on LinkedIn the other day how someone was just like, your job title does not determine your worth. And I was like, but my tax bracket does right now. My salary and my tax bracket.
that LinkedIn, it's missing should. It should not determine your worth. But in our current society, yes, all of that matters. And in the commune, which is my place of refuge now, it doesn't. It's great.
I like the idea that the community is more than just your extended family, and you're not just taking care of someone just because they're your blood relative, but that you are taking care of another person to take care of another person because they are a person. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever people put like giant emphasis on like, oh, I'm only taking care of my brother because this is my brother and I have to, and I won't take care of you because you're not my brother. And I was like, well, sorry. I don't know what to tell you about that, but
yeah. You would hope, like, it feels like you're missing a point if that's your perspective. You're really missing one of the really important things about being human and like taking care of each other and living in community. And I can't blame any individual person for that. Most of the time, I blame society and capitalism
and the brainwashing that does occur through socialization. And unfortunately, these are the systems and the society that we live and work with and in.
Yeah. So most of the time, I can't blame that individual person, but it does feel like you're missing something if you can't see the inherent worth in someone enough for you to recognize they're struggling and you have the ability to help them. There's just something missing there, which is really unfortunate.
We could go on for forever about this. But
we could.
Do you have any preconceived excitement over Kakab Hassan on liberating the Levant? Where is the Levant?
I know I'm super just excited to see where they take that.
I'm not seeing anything that says Levant on here, so I think this is actually outside of New York.
Ooh.
Okay, it's near Bay Ridge. I was just like, I can't find anything. So
interesting.
It's part of the Bay Ridge commune. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going from the Bronx to Brooklyn. Or what's left of them.
Or yeah, but we know as the Bronx and Brooklyn.
What we know is
but we're the older readers. We're the older readers of the books.
We're gonna be in our 80s during this.
I'm super, super pumped.
Ready. I don't moisturize enough for this. But thank you, as always, for coming along on this reading journey with me. I'm so excited to continue. This is a very interesting book, and I'm really enjoying it. I love the fact that it's thinking of the future rather than we're looking at the past and being like, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, we've done enough of that as a society. There will be more of it, don't worry. But
yeah,
this is it's really hopeful. There's not a lot of hopeful stuff out there for me, so I am always honored to be here.
There's not a lot of hopeful stuff out there.
Like, just slide that in there. People don't feel bad for me.
We're doing great.
I just don't feel a ton of hope. It's fine.
My goodness. Good stuff.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Always appreciate
it. I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.